and let go. Cat and him have already gone back and forth at each other. This turns into a full-on Philly brawl.
I mean, no kidding aside. We sometimes joke about NBA fights. This one was a full-on brawl.
It's a legitimate fight. And I feel like fans want to see things like this. No more of these AAU friends. Let me send you a direct message on Instagram. Everybody's friendly. These two legitimately have discontent for one another.
Ben Simmons seems to have Karl-Anthony Towns in a chokehold there.
A peacemaker chokehold.
Philly would argue he was a peacemaker. Certainly doesn't look at it like it from that angle. Embiid and Towns would both be ejected. You see, no question, Towns got the worst of it. Embiid would score 19, Towns would score 13. The Sixers would win the game by 22 points. But afterwards, that isn't what anybody was talking about. Something of an ugly night for the two big men in the NBA.
First of all, I ain't no So, there was not a lot of talking. You kind of happened out of nowhere. I just did what I had to do. I was just, trying to control myself. It happens.
It was a competitive game. It was a competitive game. I'm disappointed we lost.
How do you view what happened with you?
It was just competitive. It's a competitive game. That's all it was.
Are you all disappointed in yourself to get drawn into something like that?
It was competitive.
Did you take a swing at him, or are you trying to get him in a headlock?
This is competitive. It's competitive basketball that was being played.
So that's all he wanted to say then, but boy, did these guys have a lot to say afterwards. We're going to show you some of the social media posts that would ensue well into the night. Embiid taking serious shots at Karl-Anthony Towns, and Karl-Anthony Towns would very much respond in kind. Again, I can't read you any of the words that we have blacked out here on your screen for a variety of obvious reasons. We're going to have a lengthy conversation about the significance of that social media a little bit later in this hour. Meanwhile, that wasn't even the most consequential thing that happened in the NBA last night. Jay Will, Steph Curry, and I want you to keep a close eye as we show it again here on his left hand, broke a bone in that hand on this hard fall in a game when they were getting absolutely blown out by Phoenix. Warriors general manager Bob Myers tells ESPN he will have an MRI and a CAT scan. Woj was with us earlier this morning.
Well, as Bob Myers said, they're going to do more imaging today on the hand and get a better idea of how long he's going to be out. But I don't think anybody in Golden State expects him back, any sooner than a couple months. And they'll have an opportunity, I think, to draft very high and then bring back a team next season that's healthy with Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, and try to be competitive again in the Western Conference.
Well, what a difference a year makes. I mean, look back at where we were a year ago, and the Warriors seemed unstoppable with 5 All-Stars in their starting lineup, and now you see, obviously, it is going to look vastly different.
It's the fourth youngest team in the NBA.
Yeah, they were already a young team, and now they lose Steph. So, look, let's be realistic. This was a borderline playoff team in the Western Conference with him. What does all of this mean big picture now?
Well, fans are saying, well, we should tank. You don't need to tank. You're in the Western Conference. You're just going to get beat. But I actually think this could be a blessing in disguise for this team. They have a top 20 protected draft pick next season. And it reminds me of what happened in 1997, Greeny, with the San Antonio Spurs. David Robinson went down. Tim Duncan they got the first pick. They got Tim Duncan. All of a sudden, that led them into the future. And I think Stephen Curry coming back into this year, maybe early next year, Klay Thompson coming back. If they get a top 5 pick, they get a guy like Anthony Edwards who plays for Georgia, which people should pay attention to that name. He's going to be a star. You combine that with Draymond Green, some other right pieces. This team could win a championship next year.
Yeah, I agree.
They're that good.
If they make a couple of good moves here, depending on how they flip D'Angelo Russell, I totally agree. But let's not just say, I understand this isn't what you meant, but let's also just make note of the fact that there's a long season ahead of us. This is one of the most, if not the most popular players in the entire league.
I feel horrible for Steph, but they were also down 47-14 at the top of the second quarter with Steph in the game.
Against Phoenix.
And Phoenix is one of the surprise teams this year so far.
Yeah, but they're not the Lakers.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's an ongoing issue for them. Young, they don't play defense, but it's going to be a growing year for D'Lo and Draymond Green. Draymond Green is going to have to really step up his offensive performance. He hasn't had to do that, hasn't had to carry that load offensively. Now he's going to have to do that at another clip.
No, and for Steve Kerr and everybody, this is a team that has done an unprecedented amount of winning over the last 5 years. It's going to be a very long year for that team in San Francisco. Okay, let's get you now to the NFL on what really does shape up to be the busiest day of our sports year. Drama continuing to swirl around Baker Mayfield, who yesterday got into a testy exchange with a reporter when he was asked if the Browns had lacked urgency on a possession at the end of the first half during Sunday's loss to New England. Here was that exchange.
After the blocked field goal at the end of the first half, the 2-minute drive, it seemed like there was a lack of urgency there, or was something going on.
There was a penalty, so we were negative yardage.
No, but there was a lot of time between snaps.
Well, when the penalty happened and we're behind the chains. No, stop saying but. I just told you the clock was running and we had a penalty. You want to give them the ball back? No, you don't play. You don't know it. That's just plain and simple. Was I happy with the drive? No, we didn't score points. It's the dumbest question you could ask. What? Jesus, Tony.
So that's how that ended, but it was by no means over, because then Baker Mayfield went on Twitter and tweeted, "Everybody wants to hear the truth until they actually get it. I am who I am and always have been. Don't call it emotional when it's convenient and then passion when it fits. I care about winning, so yeah, I'm frustrated. If I was to act like it's okay to lose, then y'all would say that I've gotten complacent. My sense of urgency is at an all-time high, and if I offend anybody along the way, that's too bad." Now, this is the second time this morning that we have covered this story. It got pretty heated the first time, but my favorite comment was one that did make it. Shefty, what do you make of all the stuff you heard from Baker Mayfield?
What was your favorite comment that didn't make it?
What about the reporter? He's telling the reporter, "You've never played this game, so you don't know anything."
Well, so what? I mean, athletes never covered the game. They don't know what's always right to ask or what's not right to ask. But in this particular case, this is a long-standing battle where basically Baker Mayfield doesn't like the reporter, Tony Grossi, and that's fine. No issues there. The bigger issue, again, in his tweet is, my sense of urgency has never been greater, and that's good, because this team is 2-5, and its season is on the ropes, and they're about to be knocked out like they are every other year in Cleveland. Everybody thought that this was going to be a different kind of season, and it has not been. They're one of the biggest disappointments in football this year.
D. Wood.
How do I come back from that?
I didn't say, what did I say?
No, listen, you don't think Bill Belichick gets asked dumb questions all the time? You know, and he pretty much keeps the same look on his face or answer questions the same. That's just, to me, it's just part of being a pro. You are the CEO of the franchise in Baker Mayfield. Everyone talked about your bravado and everything they loved about it, but you're sitting at 2-5 now.
It looks immature. I agree with you, but I don't have a problem with it. Their issue is not what's happening behind the microphones, it's what's happening on the field. If he starts scoring points and scoring touchdowns, he's right. We all will celebrate how he talks trash and how funny he is, but the problem is he's not getting protected and he's not throwing the ball to his team as much as he needs.
I'll say this. I think that everybody's knocking Baker, but remember, coaches do that. Nick Saban, I'm not answering that question. So quit asking. That's just the 24-year-old version of that, Greeny. But to Nick's point, I don't know that there's a direct correlation, in my opinion, between how Baker's carrying himself off the field and his performance. I know you disagree with that, but I do think that when coaches, when their performance or what they're trying to scheme up, Greeny, doesn't work, they adjust. Well, Baker, what you're doing, for whatever reason, isn't working. So I would try a complete overhaul.
You know, last year, there were issues with Baker Mayfield, too. And nobody talked about it because they were winning football games. This year, there's an almost weekly issue with Baker, and we are talking about it because they're losing football games. You win and things go away. You lose and things get exacerbated.
Look, the way I have looked at this stuff, and I used to be one of those people out there asking those questions before I got this cushy job behind a desk, is we're all pieces in this game. We all have our own roles to play, and Baker can choose to play his any way he wants. But what you cannot do is rewrite the rules. So you cannot call all the attention upon yourself only when things are going well. So if you're going to make yourself the center of attention when things are going well, you must be prepared to be that as well when things turn the other direction. And that is the part of it, Dominique, that I have a little bit of an issue with here. You can't have it both ways.
But at no point did he say, "Leave me alone, stop talking to me." Like he's giving you the
answer. He said, "Don't call it this when it fits and call it that when it otherwise fits." He's the same person who tells you, "I don't care what anybody says about me." He seems to be paying a lot of attention to what people are saying.
He absolutely cares, and he seems immature, but he's not telling you not to cover him. He's out telling you to ask him good questions, which I think is a fair thing to say. And we can also say, hey, throw good football passes. Like it's just, you say we're all players in this game. He can receive it. So can the reporters.
So, one way or another, they desperately need wins because the division hasn't run away from them. We'll see where it winds up. Now I want to get up and go. I've got some other things to get to here. Shefty, Patrick Mahomes officially limited in practice yesterday. What is his status for Sunday?
Well, Green, I think we pay attention to what was said last week. Andy Reid said on Friday that Patrick Mahomes was close to playing Sunday night against Green Bay. And Patrick Mahomes himself said if it was a playoff game, he would have been out there. They're taking it day by day. They'll see at the end of the week and make an assessment. If there's no risk of re-injury and they're not worried about that, wouldn't surprise him if he went against Minnesota.
By the way, the NFL weekend kicks off tonight with maybe the best team in the sport, San Francisco taking on Arizona. What are the Cardinals going to do at running back?
It's very interesting. They traded for Kenyon Drake earlier in the week, and he's going to make his Cardinals debut tonight because there's no David Johnson. He's going to miss tonight's game despite the fact that he's listed as questionable with an ankle injury, and Chase Edmonds is already out with a hamstring injury. So it'll be Kenyon Drake, it'll be Zach Zenner, and it'll be Alfred Morris for the Arizona Cardinals tonight, Greeny.
And you know who they get? They get the best defense in football. Acho, everyone talks about the Patriots defense, and the numbers they're putting up are historic. But the 49ers may be just as good, if not better, and you're going to show us why.
Yes, the 49ers have an incredible defense. It's because their defense is offensive. I know that sounds oxymoronic, but what that means is they know what's coming before it ever happens. After Richard Sherman picked off Kyle Allen last week, he puts a tweet out there. And in the tweet, he says, LMAO, it was an easy read. It was a 2-by-2 formation, Z in motion, 3rd and long, they run dagger. I just had to make sure I didn't overrun it. Now let me break that down for you. I'm going to tell you exactly what he's talking about. Take a look at the tape. This is a dagger formation. They want to hit the route in white. That's a 2-by-2. It's 3rd and long, exactly what Sherm was talking about, and here it is. The Z goes in motion, confirming everything he saw in pre-week film study. All he has to do now is catch the ball. Oftentimes, fans, y'all think quarterbacks are just throwing it to DBs. They're not. There's a lot of film that goes into it that Sherm did beforehand. So to answer the point, the 49ers defense is so good because they're offensive and they're so dominant that it's offensive.
It's outstanding, and they can do a lot of that because their front seven, particularly that defensive line, is so unbelievably ferocious, for lack of a better word, that it frees them up to do some stuff.
Greeny, we'd have to have a whole segment to talk about Bosa, what he's doing up front, and what the rest of that defensive line is doing, plus those linebackers. We'll do that next week.
Well, I'm glad that you have that. And in fact, let me bring Dominique in on that thought, because we have a segment to at least touch on this, because what you might not be thinking about is that when we see these two teams play tonight, we will see this year's number 1 pick, Kyler Murray, taking on this year's number 2 pick, Nick Bosa. Now, Bosa, I've had people say to me, is not only the defensive rookie of the year, he may be the defensive player of the year. If you were to redo this draft right now, Dominique Foxworth, are you taking Murray or are you taking Bosa?
I think it's an easy answer. I love defense. It's great, but Kyler Murray. I mean, quarterback is the most important position. And if you can get an average to above average quarterback, it's better, frankly, for your team's fortunes than having a Hall of Fame defensive end. As much as I hate that, it's true. And Kyler Murray is much better than an average to above average quarterback. He's a future Pro Bowler and potentially a future league MVP. If you look at what he's doing down there with no offensive line and an aging Larry Fitzgerald as his only weapon in a mediocre defense, he's been really impressive in his rookie year, being undersized. He's going to be a great asset for years to come, even if Bosa goes on to win some Defensive of the Year trophies.
So I would rock with that logic, Greeny, but I was at Super Bowl 50. Beyonce was performing. Cam Newton was on the field. He was the MVP that year. Von Miller was on the field. And at that point in time, I realized, Neek, it pays to have a better defensive end at times, an incredible defensive end than quarterback. Kyler Murray's a dog, and I respect that, but Von Miller in that game showed me.
You picked out one game, and that entire defense was great. Throughout the history of football, I could point to a lot more quarterbacks who had success. I questioned your judgment when you showed up today in an all-pink suit. Now I know I was right.
You should have questioned my freshness, but
no, you do look good, Pinky.
But that, to Neek's point, yes, obviously having a quarterback and an elite quarterback means a lot. But there's the argument because at the highest stage, when you're having a guy who can't be blocked, and Bosa last week we saw could not be blocked.
But that isn't even my question. The question really is Murray that? Murray, if he's an average quarterback, that's one thing. Is he going to be a really good quarterback?
I think he's going to be really good. What he's doing down there with little to no help is really impressive.
Do you agree with that?
Agreed. He is going to be a boss.
And you want a pass rusher.
If he's going to be that, then you got to take him. We'll see them tonight. Meanwhile, as we continue,
I like it.
What happened on the court between Karl Anthony Towns and Joel Embiid was crazy. But we have to discuss what happened after the game, because in the long run, it was probably more important. Plus, you mentioned Cam Newton, his future in Carolina, a huge question mark. Will he be coveted by other teams in the offseason? That's the question. The answer is coming. It's Get Up.